Ever feel like you're searching for that elusive off switch
Mm-hmm.
for your brain? You
Mm-hmm.
know, that peaceful space in the middle of all the chaos of everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. I haven't quite found it yet,
Mm.
but our deep dive today might give us some intriguing clues. We're exploring the Buddhist idea of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's this ancient guide to life that promises not just inner peace, but a really fulfilling life. Now, you might be thinking, hold on, I'm not about to join a monastery. But stick with me here. What we're uncovering in this ancient text is less about, rituals and robes. It's more about this timeless wisdom that's surprisingly relevant to our modern lives.
What's fascinating is that the Eightfold Path, it's not just some random set of rules. It's directly related to the Four Noble Truths, which are really the foundation of Buddhism.
Yeah.
And it all starts with a truth that's like universally relatable. Suffering is just a part of life.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely get behind that.
Yeah.
Heartbreak, stress at work, that feeling when you burn your toes 2 times in a row. Suffering comes in many forms. But how does just, acknowledging that suffering exists actually help?
It's about understanding the root of that suffering. You see, this Second Noble Truth says that suffering comes from clinging to desires, possessions, even to ideas about how things should be.
Mhm.
Think about it. How often does your suffering come from wanting things to be different than they are?
Oh, all the time.
Right. The Eightfold Path doesn't promise to erase life's challenges, but it offers a way to navigate them with more peace and clarity.
So it's like, instead of getting stuck in that why me cycle,
Hmm.
we can learn to handle all of life's ups and downs with a little more grace.
Exactly. And that's where the third and fourth noble truths come in. The third noble truth tells us that ending suffering is actually possible, not by some magical solution, but by getting rid of that clinging we were talking about.
Okay.
And guess what? The fourth noble truth reveals the path to do just that. It is the Eightfold Path itself. It's the roadmap to cultivate qualities in ourselves that lead us away from suffering.
Okay, that makes sense. But 8 parts to this path. Where do we even begin?
It all begins with cultivating wisdom, specifically right understanding and right thought. These two elements are the foundation of the entire path.
All right, so tell me, what does understanding actually mean?
It's about seeing the world as it really is, without all the distortion of our own desires and fears.
Okay.
This means accepting impermanence, the reality that everything is always changing, nothing lasts forever, and that includes ourselves. It's a tough thing for a lot of people to accept.
No kidding. I mean, intellectually I get it, but emotionally,
Yeah.
that whole nothing lasts forever thing, it feels kind of, well, it feels a little scary. How can understanding something so heavy actually lead to inner peace?
Think of it this way. By accepting impermanence, we can learn to appreciate the present moment so much more.
Mhm.
When we cling to things staying the same, we suffer when they inevitably change. Right. But when we embrace the fact that life is always changing, we open ourselves up to a much deeper sense of peace and freedom. The truth is, clinging to the idea that things will stay the same is often what causes anxiety.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's like, by letting go of the need to control everything, we actually make room for more peace inside ourselves.
Exactly. And that's where right thought, or sammasankappa, comes in. It builds on understanding by recognizing how powerful our thoughts are. We learn to cultivate positive mental states, like loving kindness, compassion, and generosity, instead of getting carried away by negative thoughts.
Oh, I love the sound of that. But, maybe this is just me, my brain sometimes feels like it has a mind of its own. Like, the inner critic who just loves to chime in with self-doubt and worry. Any practical advice for actually putting right thought into action? It
Yeah.
can't be as easy as just, deciding to think positive, right?
You're absolutely right. It's not always easy. Our minds kind of get stuck in those old patterns of negativity. But the good news is we can actually train our minds just like we train our bodies. It takes practice, but over time, cultivating right thought becomes easier.
So it's like building a mental muscle. Instead of letting our thoughts run wild, we can actually choose to steer them in a better direction.
Exactly. Meditation is really helpful for this. But even small conscious changes can make a big difference, like starting your day by thinking about a few things you're grateful for, or making a conscious choice to deal with challenges patiently instead of with frustration. Every little bit helps.
I love that starting small and building up. It's way less intimidating than trying to completely change my thinking overnight. But okay, we've got this foundation of wisdom, seeing things clearly and choosing our thoughts on purpose. So how does that translate into actually living the Eightfold Path?
That's where the next part comes in ethical conduct, or sila. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's about aligning our actions with the wisdom we're developing.
So our actions become like a reflection of what's going on inside.
Precisely. And the first element here is right speech, samavaka. It's about realizing the power of our words and using them mindfully. It's more than just avoiding lies. It's about choosing words that are true, kind, helpful, and contribute to the well-being of ourselves and everyone around us.
So not just avoiding those little white lies,
Mm-hmm.
but actually trying to use our words to make things better.
Absolutely. And this is especially important nowadays, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure.
Think about the influence of social media, online forums, even just casual conversations. Our words can uplift or harm, inspire or discourage.
That's so true. It's like everyone's got a platform now, and it's
Yeah.
way too easy to get pulled into negativity or spread misinformation without even meaning to.
Exactly. Right. Speech encourages us to pause to think about how our words might affect things before we put them out there. It's about speaking with awareness and compassion and realizing that our words are a type of action that create these ripples in the world.
It definitely makes you think twice before posting a snarky comment online, right? Okay, so that's right speech. What's next on this list?
Next, we have right action, sama kamanta. This element is about aligning our actions with our understanding of interconnectedness and not causing harm. Basically, it's about making choices that help create a more peaceful and kind world, both for ourselves and for others.
Okay, so we're not just talking about avoiding doing really bad things here, right?
Right.
It's more like making good choices in our everyday lives, even in small situations.
You got it. Buddhism points out things like stealing, killing, and causing harm sexually as things to avoid error. These are pretty much universally understood as wrong. But it's also about doing good things in everything we do, like acts of kindness, generosity, and respecting everyone.
It's like that ripple effect we were talking about before. Even small good deeds can make a big impact.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about right speech, right action. What's the last part of this ethical conduct puzzle?
That would be right livelihood, sama ajiva. This principle encourages us to choose work that aligns with our values, work that doesn't hurt the world, and allows us to live in a way that supports our own well-being and the well-being of others.
Okay, this one seems super relevant to the world today, but also potentially really hard. Like, how do you reconcile that with certain jobs that might seem like they go against Buddhist principles? Can't always be easy to find a job that does all of that.
You're right, it's definitely not always easy. For instance, someone who works in a slaughterhouse or making weapons might find it tough to reconcile their job with right livelihood. It's about figuring out whether our work makes people suffer or whether it contributes to the well-being of ourselves and others. Sometimes that might mean making difficult decisions or finding new careers that are a better fit for our values.
Right, those are definitely clear examples. But what about something a little less clear-cut? Like, say, a graphic designer who's struggling with creating marketing stuff for a company whose products they have ethical concerns about.
Yeah.
Or a teacher who's unhappy with a school system they feel isn't helping their students. Where do you draw the line? How do you figure out those gray areas?
That's where really thinking about things comes in. There are no simple answers, and we all need to look at our own work situations and make choices that feel right for us. It's not about judging other people or acting like we're morally superior. It's more about taking responsibility for what we do and how it affects the world around us.
So it's less about finding the absolute perfect job and more about being aware of those things in whatever work we're doing, trying to make good choices within our own little corner of the world.
Exactly. And that awareness that trying to do the right thing is really what the Eightfold Path is all about. Now, if we're ready to move on, the next section is where we dive into the real inner work, mental discipline or samadhi.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Let's dive in. What's the first step we take on this part of the path?
The first part of mental discipline is right effort samavayama. It's the understanding that to have a peaceful and clear mind takes consistent effort. It doesn't just happen magically or by simply wishing for it.
So no Netflix and enlightenment then.
Yeah.
Can't just soak up inner peace while binge watching my favorite shows.
Not really. It's more like mindful practice and gradual awakening. It's about showing up every day and putting in the effort to cultivate those good mental states and weaken the bad ones.
Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here. It seems like this path isn't about trying to achieve some magical final state of being enlightened. It's more about making good choices day after day to have more peace and presence in our lives.
You're getting it. It's a lifelong journey, not a destination.
So how do we actually use right effort in our everyday lives? What does it look like to actually cultivate those positive ways of thinking?
It's like going to the gym for your mind. Just like working out our bodies to be stronger and healthier, we got to exercise our minds too, to build up mental strength, clarity, and resilience. It's about being deliberate and consistent in what we do.
And that's where mindfulness comes in, right? Being in the moment and aware of our thoughts and emotions without judging them.
You got it. Right, mindfulness samasati is the next step in cultivating mental discipline. It's about developing awareness of the present moment without judging ourselves. This includes our thoughts, our feelings, what we're physically feeling, and everything around us. It's about choosing to pay attention to this present moment on purpose, without getting caught up in judging things or wishing things were different.
You make it sound so easy. I've tried those mindfulness apps. 5 minutes in, and my brain's like, did I pay the electricity bill? I need more coffee. Should I finally clean out that drawer? It's so hard to stay focused on the present.
And that's totally normal. The
Yeah.
key is to not be hard on yourself, to just notice those wandering thoughts and then gently bring your attention back to right now.
Way easier said than done, but I'm willing to give it a shot. What about this whole meditation thing? Is that something you absolutely have to do to develop, like, mindfulness?
Meditation is super helpful for cultivating right mindfulness, but it's not the only way to do it. You can bring mindful awareness to everyday stuff like eating, walking, or even doing the dishes. It's about giving your full attention to whatever you're experiencing without getting lost in your thoughts or distractions.
So no need to sit on a mountaintop in the lotus position. I can definitely get on board with that. What's the final piece of this mental discipline trio?
That would be, right, concentration samasamadhi. This is where meditation is super useful as a way to train the mind. It's about learning how to focus our minds really intently on one single object or thought, strengthening our attention muscle, so to speak.
Okay, so this is where we're supposed to clear our minds and try to think about nothing at all? Because that's always seemed impossible to me.
It's not about completely emptying your mind. It's more about realizing that we can choose what we focus on. Instead of getting lost in all the thoughts swirling around in our minds, we can choose to focus on just one thing, okha, like our breath, a word or phrase or picture, uk,
Wow.
and then gently redirect our attention when it inevitably wanders. This obviously takes practice, but in time we get better at focusing and concentrating.
It sounds like
Yeah.
concentration is kind of like training our minds to be more like a spotlight instead of a lamp.
Yeah.
Instead of our attention being everywhere at once, we learn how to focus it on what's most important at that moment.
Exactly. And the benefits of this mental training go way beyond just meditating. When we develop right concentration, we're more focused on our work, more present in our relationships, and we can handle the ups and downs of life with more clarity and strength.
It's kind of wild how training something as like intangible as your attention can actually have such a real impact on your life. But I think we covered all 8 parts of the path now, haven't we?
We have.
So what's the main takeaway? Is it about like perfecting each element?
Yeah.
Becoming this Zen master who's always calm and compassionate and like perfectly present?
That's a really good question. And it brings up a pretty common misunderstanding about the Eightfold Path. It's not a checklist we have to tick off to become some perfectly enlightened being. It's more of a lifelong thing, a journey of learning, practicing, and growing.
Wow.
It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress and cultivating these qualities within ourselves every single day.
So we're not trying to become like enlightened robots with like 0 negative thoughts or emotions.
Not at all. In fact, trying to push down or deny our emotions actually usually makes things worse. It creates more suffering.
Oh, wow.
The Eightfold Path is about developing a different relationship with our thoughts and emotions.
Okay, tell me more about that. How does the path help us change how we relate to those messy inner experiences?
It's about realizing that our thoughts and feelings, even the bad ones, are kind of like the weather. They come and go, right? Understanding helps us see that they're not permanent, so we don't get so caught up in them, right? Thought encourages us to face those thoughts and emotions with kindness instead of judgment. And all those ethical and mental discipline elements we've been talking about,
Yeah.
they give us real practical ways to handle those inner experiences skillfully.
So it's all connected. Each part of the path helps support the other parts, creating a kind of system for living with more peace, clarity, and purpose.
I have to say this has been a really eye-opening deep dive for me. I always thought of Buddhism as being this really complicated thing, but the Eightfold Path is actually very practical and relatable.
It really is, and what's beautiful about it is you can actually start using these principles right now, today.
Yeah.
No matter what's going on in your life, it's not about making big changes overnight. It's more about taking those small, consistent steps in the direction of more peace and well-being. That's what I love about these deep dives. We always walk away with something to think about,
Hmm.
and more importantly, something to actually go do. One thing that really stuck with me was that idea of right speech, especially now with social media being such a huge part of our lives. It's like a good reminder to think about the impact of what we say and to choose kindness whenever we can. Even just taking a second to pause before we say something or hit send can make a huge difference.
It's definitely a powerful practice,
Yeah.
and it really shows what the Eightfold Path is all about: being aware, making good choices, and understanding that we're all connected.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the Eightfold Path. But before we go, I have one last thing for you to think about. What part of this path really resonated with you? And what one small thing could you do today to incorporate that idea into your life? Remember, even a tiny change in how you look at things, the dot, or one small action, the dot can make a big difference in the world.